Hi, I'm Anil Shachar. You may know me as Human.
I'm Jonathan Evans. You guys probably know me as Israel.
So together we compiled the June usage statistics and are making this video to help us prepare for U.S. Nationals later this week.
Yeah. It's usage statistics from Pokemon Showdown, and let's move on to the next slide. So, the usage statistics are contained in the description below, and when you click on them, you may notice that there are a bunch of different statistics, and they all have like a bunch of different information about them. And so the important thing to know when you're looking at the 4 different types of usage statistics are the way each of these statistics are weighted. So the first, 0, has no specific weighting for any given player. So every single player, every single team that's used, every single ult has the same amount of weight. This isn't particularly useful because I don't think, when you're going into nationals, you want to be preparing for what you see in the 1000s. You probably want to be preparing for what you see, higher up on the ladder, for what you think the people you're going to be facing are seeing. With that in mind, 1500s, what the average Pokemon player will see, maybe someone who goes 4-5, 3-6. That's like what you're supposed to find in 1500. At 1630, it's supposed to be what your average competitive player sees, so maybe 6-3 or 7-2. And 1760, it's what you see if you're playing Enosh, or
Udashi.
And so, interesting thing to note, 1630s, most people don't say, Showdown is actually indicative of things, but if you look at the usage statistics for June of in around the 1630s, it almost mirrors the usage statistics in Japan Nationals. So it is probably a pretty good estimate of what you're going to see at the tournaments.
The biggest difference between the 1630 statistics of Pokemon Showdown and Nationals of Japan were Kangaskhan, Xerneas, and Groudon all got used a bit more, but everything else resembled it almost identical.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what we did is we compiled the usage statistics of the top 25 Pokemon in June. So what you notice specifically is that as you go from 0 to 1630, there are a couple of Pokemon that rise a lot in usage. Namely, the Pokemon used in Big 6, Big B, Big C, Big T, Big whatever. Groudon, Kangaskhan, Salamence, Smeargle, and Xerneas.
And then you also see one of my favorite Pokemon, Mega Rayquaza, jumping up in a similar trend, and alternatively, you go see some other Pokemon have the opposite trend associated with them.
So specifically, Primal Kyogre has worse usage statistics at the 1630s than it does at around 0 usage, and specifically Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn sucks. No one should use Ferrothorn. And I'm not saying that because my team is weak to Ferrothorn, I'm saying that because it is bad.
And I agree, speaking as someone who used Ferrothorn at the last set of regionals.
It just doesn't do what you want it to. It dies, and people have learned how to play around it properly, even with most Kyogre teams.
It's a win-more Pokemon.
And we also looked at the statistics changing between May and June to look at the way the metagame's been shifting throughout the course of the more recent set of Nationals and the more recent set of Regionals. So you see Groudon's around the same, Xerneas, but Xerneas and Smeargle jumped a bunch, probably indicating, a bit of a shift from Big 6 type teams from double primal teams to Big 6 type teams without, an overall shift in Groudon, but an overall shift in Smeargle and Xerneas. And correspondingly, you see a decrease in Kyogre and Thundurus.
There's also a big increase in Rayquaza and Weavile, which is quite notable. And going back about the shift from double primals to Xerneas, the drop in Kyogre primal is very, very similar to the increase in both Xerneas and Smeargle.
You also see a bit of an increase in usage of regular Kyogre after Mark Duo used it in the Italian Nationals and got top 4 of it. So be on the lookout for that as you go into Nationals.
That Kyogre jumped from about 1.5% in May to about 3% in June.
In the bottom right of this presentation.
So the metagame option on Pokemon Showdown statistics, it's very confusing. It's not very intuitive. However, it has 4 things that are key in noting: Sun, Rain, Multi-Weather, and Weatherless teams.
So Sun is every team that has a Pokemon with Drought as its base ability, so every team that has Groudon. Rain is every team that has Kyogre. Multi-Weather, what's important to note here is that it does not count strong winds as one of the abilities when considering Multi-Weather. So multi-weather actually accurately describes the amount of double primal teams that are being used at around 1630s. And weatherless would be, your Rayquaza Xerneas, your Xerneas Yveltal, all those kind of teams.
Yeah. So the thing we can tell about this is there's going to be about 50% solo Groudon teams, about 20% solo Kyogre teams, about 20% double primals, and about 10% of other teams that just opted out of using a primal Pokemon. So now we can go begin analyzing the Pokemon themselves.
Common movesets, maybe something about abilities, common partners, stuff like that.
And we'll start off with the best Pokemon in this format.
Groudon. So Groudon, you're going to see Precipice Blades used around 3/4 of the time, Fire Punch used around 60% of the time, Eruption used 50%, Earth Power used around 1/3 of the time. What's important to note with this is almost all Earth Power are used pretty much exclusively with fully special Groudon, except for the odd Trick Room double ground move variant. So you're going to see around 1/3 of fully special Groudon, but then you're going to see around 17% Groudon that have opted to go for a more mixed set. Eruption has seen a rise in usage specifically because of the rise in very physically bulky Xerneas, and Eruption allows Groudon to do a lot of damage just right off the bat.
What you can expect mostly from Groudon is it's either going to be very fast or very slow. There's not too much in between going on with Groudon, although there have been some variants with the double primal going close to the 127 speed stat.
You're also likely, for other filler moves that you should be aware of, watch out for Swords Dance, the uncommon Swords Dance substitute, maybe a Rock Tomb, very uncommon Rock Polish. Groudon has a bunch of extra moves that it can be Roar.
There's also been an increase in Hidden Power Ice, which is notable because it gives Groudon a response to Pokemon like Rayquaza, which have been going up in usage.
And Salamence, which
is it's more than 50% of
which
this
traditionally
Pokemon.
beats Groudon.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the next Pokemon, which is Kangaskhan.
The best Mega Evolution. It is completely overpowered, it feels like. And Kangaskhan, almost always the 252 kind of variant, although it may opt to some defense. Its moveset is very clearly Fake Out, 97% of the time.
The rest of the moves Kangaskhan has trade off in pairs. So you're going to see around 85% of Kangaskhan have Sucker Punch, while 15% have Protect. 66% have Double Edge, while around 30% have Return. Similarly, 62% have Power Up Punch, while around 30% have Low Kick. The interesting things to note here are twofold. One, the massive increase in Power Up Punch as opposed to Low Kick at the beginning of the format. And second, the rise of Return. Important thing to note when you're looking at Return, watch out for the rise in Ditto, which has been seeing some use at the higher levels of play. And so you could, opt to go for Frustration instead, because that could give you an advantage over your opponent's, Ditto games if they try and copy your Kangaskhan.
Yeah, that also, the difference between Return and Frustration, which does not appear in the statistics, can go and cover why we don't see a normal attack move all of the time with Kangaskhan in the stats.
Also, watch out for Scrappy Kangaskhan and Inner Focus. Both are being used. I wouldn't be sure if, I would be careful of both if you're facing against Kangaskhan.
There's also the occasional Fire Punch and Aqua Tail Kangaskhan, but those are rather negligible, and both break Jonathan's heart. Don't break his heart at Nationals.
I like Fire Punch. Aqua Tail just...
Don't break Jonathan's heart. He's a good kid.
Salamence, second best Mega Evolution in the format. I thought it's been the best for me for the majority of the format. Important things to note about Salamence. First, you see either naive or hasty nature. If you know your damage calcs very well, you can take advantage of the fact that you can have as much information as your opponent and learn a bit more about what type of Salamence they're running with that. Every Salamence carries Hyper Voice, Double Edge, and Protect, and it has generally one of the next three moves in its fourth slot.
Tailwind, Draco Meteor, or Substitute. The usage respectively is 64%, 20%, and 9%. That ends up covering the last move, although it tends to have some weird filler moves. I've seen Roar sometimes on Pokemon Showdown, but that's not something that you can really come prepared for most of the time. And now, Primal Kyogre. It's used about a third of the time, and while it always uses Protect and Ice Beam with occasional Icy Wind, you go and see the last two moves have a lot more consistency in what you can expect as well.
So it either has Water Spout Scald, which is going to happen around 50% of the time, Water Spout Origin Pulse around 20% of the time, and Origin Pulse Thunder around 30% of the time. Those sets, pretty much cover all of it. What I'd look out for with Kyogre is if the team doesn't look like it has a way to beat Kyogre outside of their own Kyogre, probably has Thunder. Many dual primal teams often have Thunder on their Kyogre. If you see Water Spout, I would expect Scald as well.
Yeah. So it also has some really common teammates, the most common of which probably Primal Groudon. We mentioned this earlier. Double Primal is about 17% usage, and this means half the time if you see Kyogre, half the time you'll see it alongside Groudon. Furthermore, Thundurus is going to be seen with it 40% of the time, and Bronzong is a quarter of the time at 25%.
Bronzong is normally used with Kyogre, especially with Kyogre Yveltal and Kyogre Xerneas, as another way to get up skill swap and to deal with other Xerneas offensively as opposed to Crest, which is much more passive of Pokemon. Scarf Kyogre, again, watch out for it. It's really scary. It's really, really scary. I used to think it was terrible. Please don't lose to Scarf Kyogre. It would make me feel really bad.
Last month on Pokemon Showdown, it had about a 1.5% usage. This month, it actually jumped up to 3%, which is still not much, but it's enough to start keeping an eye out for it.
If you see a bunch of my friends have been using Scarf Kyogre as serious teams, so don't be surprised if you see, Mark Duo's team, which you can find in the description below, that it will most likely be Scarf Kyogre and adapt accordingly.
There was also an interesting player on Pokemon Showdown, Sotopop VGC, who was utilizing a Mega Gengar alongside the Choice Scarf Kyogre.
I think he also was using Virizion.
He was using Virizion. He was running it mostly because of the Quick Guard option, as Quick Guard really goes and helps prevent Thundurus from being too effective against Scarf Kyogre, which is one of the more frustrating matchups.
Anyway, let's get on with the rest of this presentation. So Xerneas, you know what it is, you know what it does. Some of them are fast, now some of them are bulky. If they're bulky, you will not do any damage to them with any Pokemon. But you might outspeed them with Smeargle, so if you know your damage calcs, you can prepare for that later on in the game.
You might also outspeed them with your Groudon, which is why Special Groudon is a strong option.
It does massive amounts of damage with Eruption if they are fast. So if you're using your own Xerneas, watch out for fast Eruption Groudon.
So we look at the teammates that are often used with it, and it's very reminiscent of Big Six.
It's what you'd expect. You get Smeargle, you get Groudon, you get Kangaskhan, you get Salamence. I'm sure people have broken down for you why this team is good already. We don't need to do that.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind, though, is Smeargle is not used 100% of the time with Xerneas. It's only used 70% of the time, and that's reflected in Japan Nationals usage as well.
Yeah. So Smeargle, one of the most volatile Pokemon in this metagame. You see almost all of its item choices are Focus Sash or Mental Herb. You've seen a marked increase in Mental Herb after Japan Cup, when Mental Herb was used to defeat the common Thundurus teams. But now, after Japan Nationals, I wouldn't be too surprised to see one or two Lumberry Smeargle. Yeah. So, if you think your opponent is like a massive weeaboo, like Conan, maybe they're running Lumberry Smeargle.
And if they're a massive weeaboo like Conan, they might also be running 3 Shields and Dark Void, because Dark Void is used almost 100% of the time on Smeargle.
Yeah. Note that the important things to know about this, Follow Me is used more than half the time, but Spiky and King's Shield are actually only used 57% of the time. So if you're playing against a Smeargle, it's not the case that, if you've seen the first 3 moves, it has Spiky or King's Shield. You might have only seen the first set of its moves. It might have a fourth that you don't know about yet. So take that into account when you're playing.
So be careful. It might have the Protect, but it might also just not have the Protect, so it might be worth playing a bit more aggressive against a Smeargle.
Thundurus, seen a massive decline between May and June, but still one of the best Pokemon in the metagame. Sash and Citrus are pretty much extensive of all of its options, Sash being around 30%, and Citrus being around 40%.
36. Together they cover about 80% of Thundurus item choices, and you can go see that Sash implies a faster Thundurus, while Citrus implies a more bulky Thundurus. So that also helps describe the timid to calm nature split.
Most Thundurus are gonna. Almost every Thundurus will have Thunderbolt and Thunderwave, very stable moves. And then the rest of the slots are a bit up to decision. Most Thundurus, I find, have Protect, so I would definitely watch out for that. But you could have moves such as Taunt, Hidden Power Water if they have Kyogre on the team, Hidden Power Ice if they're, a team like Alessio Yuri Balshetto's team. He got top 8 at Italy Nationals using Hidden Power Ice Thundurus, Groudon, Eviltal. Watch out for Role Play as well. It's not that common, but I heard it got top 4 at UK Nationals.
The most important thing to keep in mind about these moves are Hidden Power Water, Hidden Power Ice. They both are used 20% of the time on Thundurus, so 40% of the time Thundurus will have another attacking option. It may also be running Swagger, which is about 10% of the time, and keep that all in mind as you go try to figure out what that Thundurus' last move is.
Then next we have Cresselia, the best VGC Pokemon ever created in ever.
Tyranitar?
It's Cresselia. So Cresselia has 3 main items: Citrus Berry, Lumberry, and Mental Herb, which have around 53%, 20%, and 20% respectively. So that's pretty much coextensive, and expect it to be Citrus Berry. But don't be surprised if you taunt it and it gets Trick Room off anyway.
However, when you begin looking at moves, you can go see Speed Control as a primary thing that Cresselia does. Trick Room and Icy Wind are both used about 2/3 of the time, so there will most likely be some overlap, so just because you've seen one does not mean they're not running the other. Gravity is used about 1/3 of the time, and it runs an attacking move of Psychic or Ice Beam about half the time. So keep that all in mind when you go face off against the Cresselia. And
Helping Hand's also used around half the time, so if they're not running Psychic or Ice Beam, I might be worried about Helping Hand to, try and boost their damage potential. Next is Talonflame, Life Orb and Choice Band. Life Orb's around 60%, Choice Band's around 10%.
The rest are pretty negligible.
The rest
it may run Lumberry, keep that in mind. But
if you really want to.
Its key moves are still going to be Brave Bird, Flare Blitz, and Tailwind. The last move tends to be more of a filler move, along Quick Guard, Taunt, Protect. Quick Guard is the most popular one. However, you go and see some use of Taunt about 1/4 of the time. And you cannot forget to mention that Sleep Talk just won Japan Nationals.
Without even running a Tailwind. It was just 3-move Talonflame. Throwback to 2014, really. And finally, penultimately, Rayquaza. So Rayquaza has three main items: Life Orb, Focus Sash, and Assault Vest, which have 40%, 40%, and 15% usage respectively. Also, take care to watch out for Choice Band. I know that many players, while there are not many using it in the United States, there have been a couple of Japanese players and East Asian players using it in the beginning of the format. I remember Seijun using it towards the beginning. So it's important that, to know your damage calcs with Rayquaza. If it's doing much more damage than you think it should, it's probably Choice Band.
It has 3 key moves most of the time. Dragon Ascent, which has to be used on Mega Rayquaza. Extreme Speed, which is used almost all of the time on Mega Rayquaza. Protect, which is used on almost all non-Assault Vest or Choice Band variants. And then you're left with the coverage moves: Overheat, Waterfall, and Draco Meteor.
So Overheat's most likely used on every Rayquaza Kyogre team. They often have trouble dealing with Ferrothorns and Bronzong. So many Rayquaza are going to have Overheat on that. On other types of team compositions like Rayquaza Groudon, you might see some Waterfalls, and some Rayquaza are opted to go Draco Meteor, particularly with the Life Orb and Assault Vest variants, to deal lots of damage to opposing Rayquaza or to opposing Groudons.
So, for those who are wondering about the split in these moves, Overheat is used 40% of the time, Waterfall and Draco Meteor are used 30% of the time each. So that's an interesting split. It doesn't always have these coverage moves, but it usually chooses at least one. And now, to the last Pokemon, the true MVP going to Nationals.
Bronzong. So, Bronzong doesn't look that impressive. It has really weird eyes. It looks kind of terrible.
It's only used 13% of the time.
But it just got 5 of the top 8 slots at Japan Nationals, and so it's definitely on my list of Pokemon to look out for this weekend. Important things to note about Bronzong. First are its abilities. Most Bronzong, 75% run Levitate, but especially in Japan Nationals, a large number of them were starting to use Heat Proof. Heat Proof is good because you don't get one-shot by Precipice Blades, but you do get one-shot by Eruption. And also, when you set up Gravity, your Bronzong will not be using its ability anymore. So many of them opted to go Heat Proof to, prevent the Eruption, preventing them from setting up the Trick Room, and second, to, make their ability actually useful.
We then go see about a 64-23 split between the item choice. 64% tend to go with the Lumberry, and 23% go with the Mental Herb.
We did see some Akaberry Bronzong at Japan Nationals, so there are a couple of other item choices that you could be looking for. Almost every Bronzong is going to have Gyro Ball and Trick Room. There's pretty much no reason to not run Trick Room on Bronzong. I think there was one Japan Nats that ran Psychic, but I would not expect that if I was facing a Bronzong.
Neither would I.
What you're most likely going to see is 2 of the following 3 moves: Gravity, Hypnosis, and Skill Swap. Hypnosis is only if you see Gravity, but you do see some Gravity Skill Swap plays.
Yeah, this is all about 50% each, so expect to see them if you see a Bronzong.
Finally, team to look out for going into Nationals: Big B, Big Bell, Big Bronzong, Kangaskhan, Salamence, Groudon, Xerneas, Smeargle, and Bronzong. It's the team that did the best at Japan Nationals, so that's what I'm on the lookout for if I'm looking at usage, if I'm trying to build my team this week.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for watching, listening in, and good luck at US Nationals. We really hope to see you there.
See you guys.
Hope it helps.